How do you scale and even deepen relationships in an increasingly digital space? Welcome to Business Without Barriers, the show bringing you relevant strategies to thrive and succeed in a volatile world, and the show turning barriers into bridges by bringing humanity back to business. I'm your host, Carmen Wild, and opening up his success vault today is Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo is the inventor of the Relationship Flywheel, host of the Chief Executive Connect podcast, and Not Your Average Investor Show. Co-founder of BeTheStage.live, a marketing agency that turns clients into community and community into your greatest business development asset. He is obsessed with human connection and has used his expertise to grow nonprofits, sell $60 million plus construction projects, rescue fledgling startups, set record-breaking quarters for $100 million plus companies, and he was named a Latino Leader of the Future and a top 20 under 40. More than anything, Pablo is dying to be your friend. A very warm welcome, my friend Pablo.
Thank you, Carmen. Super happy to be here. I appreciate you having me on your stage. I'm somebody that appreciates the stage. So I'm hoping I can be super duper valuable to you and to our friend that's listening. And I know that you and me are going to be friends, but I hope we'll make a couple new friends out of this.
Oh, I'm sure on that note, we absolutely are going to have a super duper next hour together. So I believe you just did a cat burglary little stint and broke into your own house to be on the show. That's dedication.
Yeah, I did. Listen, I had, there's somebody local here in Jacksonville who he's one of the partners of one of my, in my biggest client. And he is a real community driver here, right? Like he really wants to be the light of what Jacksonville will be in the future. And we're in the city that is kind of going through an adolescent phase and it's about to become this beautiful butterfly. And I've been dying to get a meeting with him because I know that he has this in mind. And I've been through a couple iterations of this in Miami when Miami was at this stage, and I couldn't help but take a meeting with him early this morning to talk about how, we created this like movements in Miami. And I thought I had it all scheduled in perfectly and everything was great. And I got here 10 minutes before the show only to find that my wife had, not on purpose locked me out of the house because I forgot my keys. So I had to pop open a screen and jump through a window, but I got here on time, right? I think I was a minute late. I think I did it.
I wish we could have caught that on camera. That's just like the movies. What an awesome entry. So high five to you for doing what it takes to
appreciate it.
Service your friends. On it. High note, go back into your memory bank and find one of the moments you would consider as magic, a magical moment in your life. Share a magic moment with us. Take us there and tell us what you were doing, who you were with, if you were with someone.
It's funny. This is going to sound like a sad moment, but when you say this, I have to go here. And my brother passed away from pancreatic cancer about 7 years ago now. And having an older brother that is 8.5 years older than you is a great example of having somebody that contextually you can relate to, but with enough distance to really get some perspective on what works, what doesn't work, things of the sort. And growing up, my brother admittedly was the biggest influence in my life, right? But it was almost a negative North Star, right? Like I would be like, all right, Bert did this, so I want to do that. Right? Like he didn't do this, so I need to focus on this, or he did this and I don't want to do it. When my brother passed away, 1,200 people showed up to his funeral. And I say this as the magical moment, right? Like I'm not kidding when I say that even the next day, I already had this perspective of, my brother, who had always seen himself as a tragic hero, gave his life for all of us to learn something really, really special. And for me, what that was two things. Number one, seeing 1,200 people at his funeral, looking around and thinking to myself, I may have had my issues with the Catholic Church since I've been a teenager, but this is my community. And the value of having a community, the value that these people that showed up to this funeral and had been in our life for the last 2 years, helping us out throughout the struggle, is the greatest value anybody can offer. And I immediately was like, the business model of organized religion is community, and it's been working forever, right? Like that was a major, major magic aha moment for me. And then the other thing that happened gradually was this idea. I talked about this anti-North Star thing. But everybody that approached me that day, and I'm telling you that for at least 3 to 4 years, people would come out of the woodwork randomly on Facebook or show up at my parents' house to talk to them or whatever. Every single one of them would say, your brother is somebody that when he was in a room, everybody knew that they were going to be comfortable. He aggregated people together. He connected people to each other, and he just made the room a brighter place. And as somebody who my entire life has seen myself as that and has valued that as one of the things I most admire in people, I never saw it in my brother, right? Like it was anti-North Star, right? Like I never gave him credit for that. And my head immediately went to, what else am I missing? What if somebody that was the best man at my wedding, that I love dearly, has this incredible value to everybody around them and I never gave him credit for? What am I not learning from my loser uncle, from that guy from high school that I think that I think has done everything wrong, from, somebody that rubbed me the wrong way? And it became very obvious to me that the people around us have, even the closest person to you has more value to everybody else around them and you than you give them credit for. And those two moments, those two conclusions, I finally realized about 1.5 years ago that it's those two things have been what have guided my life ever since then. And as somebody that grew up differentiating myself from my brother, my mission now is to be remembered exactly how these people see him. So that's it.
Wow.
That's magical to me.
And that is truly magical. I mean, to take that bittersweet moment and create it into such a magical experience and memory. And now I can see what's carried through in your business. And we're going to speak about that in terms of the community and the value in the people. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for allowing me to share that. I for a long time, I didn't really speak about it because listen, I know I'm emotionally intelligent. I know what works to get people to connect, and I know vulnerability connects. And this is a very, very vulnerable thing for me. And I also don't want to cheapen it in any way. So as I share that, I think I'm not trying to position something as like, my brother died and now you got to support me. But it really is, I now see it as this is his legacy. If I can continue his legacy and these lessons that I've learned from it, to keep him in my life, then I want to do it,
That's beautiful. Don't change any of it. And it's just magical the way in which you've captured it.
Thank you.
So was that part of the moments that made you become obsessed with human connection, or was there before that? Take us through.
Man, that's been a lifelong thing. I think that between the two magical moments I thought of, the other one was, I'm the most American person in my family, right? So I've always just kind of been like an insider, outsider and everything. And my first formative memory is really that I very much remember as like a out of body experience is walking into the first day of preschool and knowing that I was the only kid that didn't speak English. And that feeling of how do I connect? How do I belong? Right. And lucky for me, there was one kid, Jose Garrido, who became my best friend forever, who spoke Spanish. And at that age, you're 3 years old, you're like a sponge. Right. And so ever since then, I've been obsessed with it. But a year later, we moved to Spain and my parents enrolled me in a British academy, which is actually how I learned English. Is I had to unlearn the Queen's English myself. But I got to that school thinking I speak Spanish and I speak English. I'm not going to have to worry about this thing. But I left home crying because I didn't understand the Spain Spanish dialect or the Queen's English dialect. And I think that those two really like impactful moments to me have always just led me to be this person that deeply cares about the dynamics of a room and who feels left out and how I can walk in and immediately connect with, right? Like on a very selfish level, I walk into every room wanting to be friends with everybody and wanted to like immediately connect, but I'm also looking for that person that feels like an outsider. And how do I, bring them in? How can I make them not have that feeling? And that's just, as long as I remember, that's been me. And that created me into this little kid that would always speak to adults and would talk to anybody and was always making intergenerational relationships. And that served me very well my whole life. Now I do it with people much older than me and people much younger than me. So that's been more of a lifelong obsession. But that moment with my brother was kind of like, this is how you turn your superpower into your life and your business and what feeds your soul and your bank account at the same time, kind of thing.
And such a beautiful gift that you found it early and that you've nurtured it and then you carried it through, and there's just alignment through everything that you do. I mean, that's an incredible gift that so many people search for and still don't find. So, and it makes it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, the important thing is to search for it, right? Like I think for the majority of my life, now I'm 40, up until my early 30s, I used that gift selfishly, right? Like I described myself as a 28-year-old Huck Finn at times. And I was very comfortable being somebody that could, talk people into stuff, be it sales or be it a social situation and or whatever. And it wasn't until my early 30s when I started to realize that my, Ace Ventura funny guy shtick had a bit of a shelf life when I got involved with nonprofits. And by getting involved with nonprofits on a volunteer level, I started realizing a couple of things. I started realizing, number one, the most influential people in town are on the boards of nonprofits, and they became the most influential people in town by serving others. So at that moment, I was like, oh, the service thing. That's what'll get me the most friends, right? Like I've already worn out this whole like Huck Finn thing. So I've been leaning into that ever since. And understanding that I had this gift of like, I know how to get in, right? Like I know how to be likable and make people likable. And the moment that I flipped that to how can I serve others with this was when everything really started coming together. And that's when I really started finding my alignment, which really hit probably about like 2.5, 3 years ago.
That's incredible. And so you were named Latino Leader of the Future. What do you think are the attributes that they saw?
Honestly, man, both of those awards, I feel like it was just like I knew somebody that was a gatekeeper to that award. Like it was a relationship, right? Like I got nominated for that through Latino Leaders magazine because of my friend Vanessa Rodriguez, who had been named it the year prior and was asked to nominate somebody. And the top 20 under 40, I got named to that because of my friend Estrellita Sibila, who was engaged to the editor of the magazine. That was like, oh man, you got to know about this guy, Pablo. Right? Like, I don't know. I guess what they saw is, that's a hard one to answer. I've never really thought about that. I'm starting to accept these like outside validations of myself recently. But back then I realized that I was too stuck in my own head of like the stuff that I wanted to even think about how people saw me from the outside. But now as I recollect, I understand that people see me as a visionary and as a creative person and as a, I think a connector is something people have always seen me as, which I'm okay with I've always been okay with acknowledging. But I think that's it. As I look back at those days when I got named for those awards, I had just wrapped up this like Leadership Miami program. I had started these like young professional groups, and I've revisited the conversations of like the beginning of these groups in the last 3 years that I've started really acknowledging my creativity. And I've had, those are still some of my best friends. And I've had these conversations like, man, like I'm starting to think that I'm a creative person. They're like, are you kidding me? Like you named the group that we did, we were all strangers in a room and we were forced to do something. And the first person that came up with the idea was you. And we went with the idea and we've stuck with that idea. And look at all these other groups. Like that's what you've done. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I guess they saw me as somebody with good vision and good intention and good ideas for leadership, I guess.
The creative connector must have stood out there already. So absolutely. We just don't always see it, but other people see it. And so it's so amazing to be surrounded by people who believe in us. So, and I'm so glad you're starting to acknowledge those external validations, which as you should.
Yeah. Thanks, Carmen. The voice inside your head is often the least kind voice that you speak to regularly.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
So if you don't have good people around you influencing you, then you could get lost in that voice. And it's really hard to gain perspective without distance, right? Like you can't, if you're looking at a painting from this close, you can't really see the painting, right?
Exactly.
You got to get a little bit further away. So you need people in your life beyond the people that you've always known, right? That have a little bit extra, you need people at different distances from you to inform, give you feedback on how well you are executing on whatever vision you have for yourself, or to provide ideas for a vision that could be for yourself that you may not have thought of from the inside out.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate to, have naturally leaned that way. And now I've started to really, really embrace it.
And it's, we'll come to the community side of things in a moment, but that's what creates the effectiveness of these groups and communities and coaches and mentors and beautiful people around us that are inspired and pushing us to our greatness. So fantastic. So maybe part of what we're talking about might be answered in the next question is like, what would you say right now in this really messy, interesting, exciting, filled with opportunity world we live in? What would you say is a non-negotiable skill to succeed?
Communication.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the ability to communicate, like, or somebody with the ability to communicate in your corner. I think that we are right now in a transitional period of human evolution, society, however you want to call it, right? There's this book by Robert Greene that is The Laws of Human Nature. And it's these 18 immutable laws that human beings have abided by over the last forever, right? The 17th law is this law of generational myopia and how your generation affects you. And within it, he talks about this theory from a 14th century Islamic scholar that talks about how human nature has gone through these cyclical patterns of 4 stages that correspond to 4 generations. First generation, the world is in chaos. You need these big, visionary leaders with a powerful voice that unite people to fight through this really, really tough period and endure these hardships in order to get to a sunny other side. The following generation is so marked by that struggle that they look for, how can we just figure out what we get along with, right? Like, how can we coexist here, right? Let's all just agree on some stuff. Third generation is so far removed from that struggle and so used to the coexistence that they start to think, well, yeah, okay, we're getting along. Why can't I get a little bit of this here? It's the more materialistic, more individualistic. And then that fourth generation comes around and they see the materialistic generation. They see people that have lost their way. They're like, oh my God, world is in chaos. We need a revolution. It starts over. I think it's, if that resonates at all, I think it's pretty clear that we're in the throes of that fourth generation to first generation kind of transition. And given that it's cyclical, given that we've done this already throughout history, right? There's like quotes from Socrates talking about this new generation of kids is soft, right? Like it's the same thing we're saying right now. Millennials, Gen Z, whatever, they're weird. And if you buy into that and you really look at it, or at least the way that I look at it, it's the regular cyclical generational thing with one big difference. We have gone from a world where information served as a silo, as an advantage, and a power over culture, right? When you have this advantage, you could hold it over people. Brene Brown talks about this. You could hold it over people, keep it to yourself, and that's how you get ahead. To a world where information has been completely democratized. Whatever advantage you have today will not be your same advantage tomorrow. So you need to figure out how to win power with. You need to figure out how to win by either continually innovating or putting people in the right position to succeed. And that's the only sustainable way to do it. And the big difference has been that freedom of information, the idea that everybody now has a megaphone, right? Like that is what we're trying to get used to right now. Everything else, same. If you look at the 70s in America, civil rights, female equality, racial equality, same stuff that we're going through right now of like old guard versus new guard transition. That just happens every 40 years, 50 years, right? Like, but the idea that now everybody has a megaphone means that you can't be a creep. Right? You can't win power over. Like you have to be well intended and you have to be looking out for more than just yourself, because the internet, social media, all of these mechanisms of communication are the light. They're going to shine light in the deepest, darkest crevice of anything that you got going on. So you better be ready to accept it and move forward as not a creep. If you have it, if you don't have it, good news, get loud, right? So that is the transition that we're going for. And I think that this is a transition similar to when the printing press was invented, similar to when radio was invented, similar to when TV was invented, right? Like there are these communicational shifts that happen that shift a large source of power and influence from one type of person to another group of people that understand how to communicate under the new context. And we now have a new context of worldwide communication, which is what we're doing right now, right? Like the ability to create content and put it out at scale, and everybody's able to have their stage and reach their 1,000 people, 2,000 people, 100 people, 100,000 people, 2 million people, right? So the better that, if you can't communicate and you don't understand how to communicate digitally, this is only going to increase, man. Like I see no other future than the future of where anybody that is a person that generates revenue or generates influence is not some kind of their own broadcast system. Like it's just impossible to contend against it. And only 1 to 2 to 3% of the people right now are actually taking advantage of that. So as this continues to permeate culture, as the technology gets simpler for, someone like me to start doing it, right? Like I am not technologically gifted, but I've figured it out, right? Like, and programs continue to get easier. The editing program, the Zoom, the social media distribution tools are continuing to get simple. And I just see it as this like beachfront real estate in Manhattan that only a couple of people have set up a couple tents on and nobody's built up a resort. So I think that's what's happening.
So communication resort. I love it. I love where this is going, Pablo.
Thanks.
So you said in your LinkedIn about business is relationships. It's like, that's it. And if you don't believe me, then we've got nothing else to say to each other. I'm with you, brother. So after what you've just said, I mean, that was an incredible foundation for this statement, business is relationships. Tell us a little bit more about the context of what you mean when you say business is relationship? Because I actually want to tie it in with something else where you say, are you scaling your communications? Is it just like a bunch of transactions, or are you actually deepening relationships there? So in that, I'd like you to just comment on those two things.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've never been asked this before, but I think the difference is, it's one thing the difference between scaling communications and scaling relationships is that scaling communications is a one-way street. Scaling communications is, what can I put in front of you, to keep you in a way that I can benefit from it. Scaling relationships is, how can I add value to your life so that the day that I need value, I can ask you for it as well. And it's not a transactional thing. It is a infinite game piece. So I think as recently as 2008, our behavior has drastically changed when interacting with businesses. And our behavior as consumers has drastically changed, right? As recently as 2008, if your mom wanted to set you up on a blind date, they would talk to a friend and give them a picture of you. And then that friend would show them a picture of their child. And that's what would happen. Today, if your mom wants to set you up on a blind date, guess what's happening? You know everything about this person before you even think about meeting them for coffee. And the same is with business, right? Like in 2008, if you found out a company or a product, you might put their domain in to the website browser and see what's on their website, or you might Google them and see what's on Google or Yahoo back then, or whatever, whatever the search engine was. Today, when you find out a business or a service, you're probably going to search YouTube and find out what people are saying about it. You're probably going to put a post on your LinkedIn or your Facebook saying, hey, has anybody ever done business with this person? It's no longer people in 2008, when you couldn't find out enough information based on a website or whatever, you're like, all right, whatever. I know about 15, 20% of what I need to know. I'm going to take a call with a salesperson. They're going to give me the other 80%. Nowadays, if you don't know 80 to 90% of what you need to know, you're not taking a call with a salesperson, period. And businesses right now are still operating under that paradigm. They still think that it is in their best interest and your best interest to just plan a 15, 30-minute call with their salesperson so they can get to know you. And what they don't realize is that the environment is getting noisier and noisier, right? Like more and more companies are out there actually providing this like context and value that you have to know before you get on a sales call with somebody. And the infrastructure around word of mouth is becoming easier and easier, right? Like it is so much easier right now to whatever software we're talking about to go on to a forum and talk to 100 people that have used it. And get from them their opinion, not from salesperson testimonial that gives you 3 of them their opinion, much less just ask on LinkedIn or whatever, right? So you got to combat that. And the only way you combat that is by building relationships, not by trying to seek transactions. It's by building relationships so that the people, when they're asked, are just like, oh no, yeah, I have a relationship with this business. I have used this. It's part of my life. It adds value to me. It's not, oh yeah, I got on the phone call with a salesperson and he closed me or she closed me, right? Like that to me is the difference. It's the approach of content as a commercial versus content as a way to serve people and as a way to add value to your life, inform you, enable you to make the right decision. That to me is relationship building.
Can you give us a few practical ways we can deepen our relationships as businesses? So things that you know is working, or things that you help clients with, some things that you do perhaps. How do we deepen those relationships? And maybe also, given that it's mostly digital, what do you see can work? Yeah,
listen, I think this relationship flywheel thing is the move, and I think anybody can do it, right? Like the relationship flywheel to me it has 3 prongs, right? Mm-hmm. Value, connections, and content. If you can understand who you're trying to serve, right? Like business, political, whatever you're trying to do, who you're trying to speak to, who are you trying to serve, and understand that whatever you have inside of you, whatever your solution is, your product is, your beliefs, however you're approaching this thing, you're only part of the equation of whatever is going to get this person to their goal, right? You're just part of it. You're not the whole thing. You got to understand there's a whole ecosystem around what they're trying to achieve. And if you can take inventory of what that ecosystem is, of how you can enable somebody to get to what they're trying to achieve that you're trying to help, I call it find the ways to open the doors to the keys. Find a way to serve the people with the keys to the doors that you want to open. Right? Like that's the overall strategy, right? So if you understand the people you're trying to serve and what they're trying to achieve, you can take inventory of that. And then you can take inventory from your network, from your clientele, from the people themselves who have some of those keys as well, and from, an arm's length person that you can find online or invite to some kind of a forum, and think, okay, if I can position people with the value that my clientele, the audience that I'm trying to serve, if I can position people in front of them that have that value on a regular basis, then I now have an interactional point where I'm showing up to provide them value and to become guilty by association with the things that they need. Right. So that's the first piece. It's understanding what that is. Right. And again, my company's called Be The Stage because I just believe stages are the leverage point for all of us. And right now, when I think of a stage, it can be, a stage in front of a room, or it can be a podcast, or it can be an email list, or it can be a webinar. Right. But to me, the ultimate way of doing this thing is creating a weekly webinar that you brand as a show. And on that show, you create a schedule of the people that you're going to present to your clientele at large based on that value, right? So that's the stage. Now, when you are hosting somebody, right? Let's say I want to host you, Carmen, to provide, business solutions and how to be a podcaster and business strategy to my audience of $50 to $150 million business owners, how to implement the things that you've learned, right? So that becomes that let's say we'll call that is the program for the third week of April. Now, when people show up, you send it to your list and be like, hey, this is Carmen. She's built out an audience based on solutions for business, and she's got a podcast. She's going to teach you how to use a podcast to grow your business, right? So now whoever wants to show up to that shows up in the audience. You and I are now having this conversation via webinar format. And right now, I focus on 3 levels of connections, right? As this conversation is happening. Number 1, my connection to you. Having that conversation where I'm really showcasing what your hopes and dreams are, what your superpowers are, how you serve others, what advice can you give to people at large. That deepens our bond, right? Because I'm sitting there listening to you, I'm getting to know you, I'm there being of service. So that makes us long-term friends one-to-one. The connection with the audience that shows up for me makes it so that whether it's 6, 16, 60, or 600 people show up, they feel like they're getting an hour of my time and I'm only spending 1 hour, right? So just being in front of them, being guilty by association with a really bright person that's given them amazing solutions and great ideas for their business, now they feel like they're spending that time with me. Then that third connection is the connection between my audience and you, right? So when somebody asks a question, just like, oh, okay, well, I'm a garage cleaning company. How do I do a podcast? Right. So instead of phrasing it as like, hey, Carmen, how do you do a podcast for garage cleaning companies? I say, oh, hey, Billy Buttons over here who lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and he's had a garage industry. And I know him because of this XYZ. He has a question for you, Carmen. It's this. You phrase it as a warm introduction. Right. And that starts to give everybody involved a little piece of that stage, right? Like if you hear your name, if you hear valuable information for you on that stage, you feel that you own a piece of it. So if you continue doing that, you will get people coming back. Now, because you're being valuable, because you're giving them a piece of that stage, you're creating that, for you now, you're not only just had a conversation with me, you've had a conversation with me and a bunch of other people that showed up aren't just gaining from me, they're gaining from you as well. And you keep doing that, that's valuable by itself. I've been doing that for 10 years in community organizations, and nonprofits do this really well. Chambers of commerce do this really, really well. Now, the third piece to go to today's context is the content piece, right? So if you're having that conversation and you're recording it and you're driving those 3 connections at all times, taking that 1 hour conversation and turning that 1 hour into the branded YouTube show about whatever it is that your people care about, taking the best 10 minutes into like, here's a really, really practical tip on my YouTube channel of something you care about, taking the audio and making it into a podcast, taking the 5 best back and forwards of like either you teaching something specific in a minute and a half, or me and you riffing on a subject and iterating through how this works for you and how it works for me, and turning that into short form LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter content, taking the 5 best questions being asked from the audience, turning that into like Q&A, short form video content where the person's name shows up on the screen and the question gets asked. And then now you're into the video answering the question, taking the 5 best sentences and turning it into quote cards, taking the lessons learned and turning it into an email, taking that email and expand it into an SEO optimized blog. Now you've taken that 1 hour interaction, you've taken that one seed and you've planted it in 20 pots. And you can now put it across 5 different ecosystems where it can flourish. And it creates this kind of like energy ball, like gravitational energy field, where anybody that sees the quote card is like, oh, that sounds cool. Where is that from? And it's like, oh, okay. Oh, it comes from this 3-minute Instagram video. Oh, that 3-minute Instagram video, I can listen to it on a podcast and hear the whole conversation. Oh, in that podcast, I like it so much. Maybe I show up to the live show and I actually meet them. So now you've created this like perfectly frictionless nurture system where everybody that cares about anything that you care about or you has the ability to decide for themselves how quickly and how close they want to come to you. And that allows for your business to spend time on the phone with the people that are most cooked and ready to buy, right? As opposed to people that are just like, oh, I just heard about you, right? Like people show up and they're ready, man. Like it's a yes or no, right? Like it is just a little bit of context and you're sold. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's a really great way to respect your salespeople's time too, outside of this great, you know, marketing effort and great value add and great relationships, because you're now able to, you know, grow relationships at scale, right? Like the people that come to your audience feel like they know you, and the people that engage in your content when you're not there feel like they know you. The people that show up to the show, you start to get to know them. The people that come on the show, you really get to know them, right? And it just rinse and repeat. It's a flywheel. It continues to grow.
Fantastic. And you offer this service, don't you?
Yeah. So I offer this as a done for you solution.
Yes.
Off, right? Like it's really just go through that methodology, have the stuff, you're doing a version of it, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
the more that you add to all these pieces, right? Like the next piece, I don't know, maybe for you is schedule it so that you now have a live audience showing up to these calls and start building that relationship. Yep. And that involves a little bit of planning, right? It involves a little bit of extra planning. So it's a little bit of extra effort, but you know, it pays off. And then after that, it's how do you make it into the 25 pieces of content? And for me, you know, that's getting easier and easier, right? Like there's now a video editing tool called Descript that will transcribe a video and allow you to edit the video based on the written content. So you and I can download this right now and go Control F, Relationship Flywheel. And it tells me when I'm describing the relationship flywheel. And then I can highlight the piece that I just described, the entire methodology of the relationship flywheel, clip it into its own clip and share it on my social media. So now it's a 3-minute thing of like, look, this is how you do it. Right. So all that's getting easier. So it's just like building your infrastructure around it little by little, but you got to start with creating content, and you got to start with creating content about other people. Because once you start, you know, when I first started this, when I wasn't doing this long form, I was just networking in rooms and somebody would tell me something interesting and be like, hold on a second, grab my phone and be like, hey, you were just describing cybersecurity as cyber hygiene. Tell me about this. And they'd be like, oh, well, cyber hygiene is, you know, the idea that the cleaner your stuff, you know, like this is a real life example, right? And that would be a 3-minute video. I'd be like, that was awesome. Go to LinkedIn, post it, be like, what's your name? Oh, okay. Just met this guy, super fascinating conversation about cybersecurity. Check it out. Right. Like, and once I started posting content about other people on LinkedIn and tagging them and making it about them, what started happening was the people that follow me were like, oh, well, look at all this other stuff I can learn from Pablo, apart from just like how he likes to talk. And B, people in their network started seeing, oh, my friend's on TV. And who's this person talking to them? And maybe I should connect with that person, right? Like it's just as long as you're making content about other people and making it about them, then you grow through their networks in a value add way. And that's really at the key of all of it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And it's something that I feel quite strongly about, because if you have a look at the content that we see online, the person that is all about me, and that's the only thing that you ever see from this person, It's, have a look at me. I've appeared at this event, and me again, and it's me again, and here's this. And eventually, for me, let me speak for myself, I'm like over that person. After the 20th post I'm like, okay, I'm not getting anything more from this person. So I love what you're saying. Add a little bit of spice with bringing other people. Nothing wrong with your own content, absolutely. But add a little bit of spice with other people. It's a collaborative culture that we're in now. And
yeah, like, listen, I think it should be about 80-20, 80% other people, 20% you, right? Because that way your content is always fresh because it's somebody else. You're going to continue to, you're going to have the stuff that you care about. So you're always going to be putting your spin on it. But those interactions with other people are going to feed the way that you recontextualize your thing, right? Like to me, everything is about repetition, right? Like you're going to get in shape by doing the same thing over and over again, right? You're going to get better at communicating by doing it over and over again. Like you're going to reach more people by contextualizing it different ways, right? Like right now, if you and me make a piece of content together, I'm sure it's going to land better for a woman than if I'm making a piece of content with another guy, period, right? Because you see yourself in the content, right? Like it's all about how the person. There's something I like to say that is people bond, connect with, and do business with people that understand them, not people they understand, right? So if you allow the receptor of the message to see themselves in the message, it's more likely to land. And the more people who I speak to that look different than me, think different than me, speak different than me, it allows me to land that message on people like that, right? Like I do great with 40-year-old dudes that like sports and have always just been kind of doodly, right? But as I grow up, in order to land intergenerationally across genders, across cultures, it's really all about talking to people that are different genders and different cultures and different ages, so that you understand where their thinking is, and then you're able to recontextualize the things you believe in the way that they want to hear it.
Speaking about what will help us break down the boundaries, Pablo, where exactly what you're speaking to kind of takes away the boundaries, and we start understanding more, and we start getting into cultures, age groups, environments that we would not normally have got into. And that's so important about what you're saying, which is amazing. So I really love, and I love that your take on how to develop this community, and your flywheel it's really a clever, yes, absolutely. There's a lot more work involved in it, and it takes planning, it takes time. There's so much involved, but the rewards are endless. So
yeah. Listen, it's taken me 3 years to be able to execute on it the way that I'm executing on it right now. It's taken me 2 years to be able to provide it as a service so that I can grow out my team so I can do it for myself. Right? Yeah. Like, if you can figure this stuff out, it's valuable. Like you can do it for yourself, or you can do it as a service, or you can leverage it a bunch of different ways. But it's really worthwhile learning how to communicate at scale through these new contexts, and putting in the spin of service is the key. Period.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I wish I had started this platform 10 years ago.
Then you'd be Gary Vee.
But the value it's intoxicating. It is, the time put in is, it's overshadowed by the valuable benefit across the world. All of a sudden, you've got a global platform. No matter where you're sitting. I sit on a tiny little pinprick of an island on the east coast of Africa. I'm talking to people across the world. Most people, when I say I live in Mauritius, they go, where the hell is that? Like, I've never heard of that place. So
that's powerful, man. That's super. And that's where everything is headed, right? Like I was in the e-commerce, I was the VP of business development for like an Amazon seller software 3 years ago. And I'm at this like Amazon conference, and there's a young man from Nepal that's like, I'm here because we make really, really good yoga mats in my village. And I think that if I can sell these yoga mats on Amazon, I can save my village. Like, Like, what's more beautiful? Yeah, that's real. That's a real power, man. You know, like we now have this access to the world. A couple weeks ago, I'm obsessed with this discipline and of category design, right? Like it's this strategy. I don't know if you ever read the book Play Bigger, right? But like,
no, I haven't.
so it's a strategy of like positioning and building a business based on that positioning that I think it's absolutely freaking brilliant. And it is the reason why, you know, like it's how you create a category king, right? It's like when I say MP3 player, you think of one thing. When I say ride sharing app, you think of one thing, right? Like it's how you do these kinds of things. The author of that book, the godfather of category design, this guy, Christopher Lochhead, that I've been listening to his podcast now for like 2 months. And you know, I've created a relationship with him on LinkedIn. I still haven't talked to him in person, but a couple of weeks ago, you know, we're sitting there texting on LinkedIn because something happened, and I sent him a funny screenshot because it made me think of him. So I've created a genuine relationship with him, and he's just like, "Listen, man, I'm blown away by the idea." Like, he's like, "This has been my life's work for 30 years, and for 25 of them, I thought that I would be an old drunk stone guy at a bar mumbling to myself about how I had the keys to everything and nobody wanted to listen because the people that I would talk to only closed about 15-20% of the time that they listened to me. Then I put out this book 5 years ago. It's now in the top 1% of business books of all time. My podcast reached #1 on Apple, and I'm just so blown away by the power of information to get out there. And now that I'm at the top of the mountain, I've just always thought that if you're on the top of the mountain, you throw down a rope, right? So like, you know, my head immediately went to like, man, I'm just happy that we live in a world where there is a direct line of communication to the top of the mountain and a noble man sits atop it, right? Like we are more interconnected now than ever to anybody, man. Like that opportunity from like saving your village in Nepal to, you know, to talking to the foremost authority in whatever discipline you've been obsessed with for 3 years, it's there. Take advantage of it, man. You know, like there's ways to do it.
Yeah, it's totally, and that's what I said, it was so intoxicating because the idea of, okay, who should I speak to next? Okay, let me Google in leading award-winning blah, 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 and you hit a name and you see this like 20 awards, 50 books, blah, 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 and you connect with them and say, hey, I've got a growing show. It's not #1 on Apple. Would you be a guest? And they say yes. And it's like, that's how interconnected we are.
Yep. The power of having a stage.
Power of having a stage. And yes, of course, there are a few little things. I make it totally about them. And it's about adding value. And I find little things, yes, to make it a bit more personal. And there's a cause behind this particular show. However, we are so interconnected and we need to realize the power of what you're saying, Pablo, is business is relationships. And that's the only way we go. It's not going back to anything. Yeah. It's going more and more and more that. So this show's mission is to bring more of our humanity into business, and everything that you've been speaking about is exactly this. I mean, what a better way to tap into our humanity than relationships. If we were to do more of this, Pablo, if we were to deepen more relationships with more people and make it about service and value, what do you think would happen to business? What would happen to economies? What would happen to our world?
Listen, I think but the other way around is what happens if you don't do this, right? Like, think about it, Carmen. I can be talking to you right now and be like, man, that's a really nice microphone you got there. And in about 30 minutes, I'm going to get an advertisement for a new microphone on my Facebook feed. Right? Like, that's probably going to happen. And is it because the algorithm is so good? Is it because it's listening to me? I don't know. But is that going to get better or worse, however you want to see it? For sure. Right? Like at some point, my eyes are going to dilate with your blouse, and then I'm going to get offered the blouse to give to my wife, you know, like completely seamlessly in my Google glasses or whatever is next. Right? Like, so in this world of like rapidly automated demand and commoditization of product and supply chain, how do you keep a client? Like, how do you keep a client? How do you keep an employee, right? Like, how do you keep anybody's attention? And I found that what the Catholic Church did to me is the move, right? Like, if I am friends with you because we use the same thing, if I connect with a person based on my usage of a service or based on my relationship to somebody else, it is much harder to change products, change service, change relationships. Like I don't know if this applies to a worldwide audience, but Harley Davidson motorcycles in America are this like unbelievable brand. And if you ever get into motorcycle culture, you know that if you buy a Harley Davidson, all of a sudden that is who you become. You're a Harley rider. Yes. If you change motorcycles to a Honda motorcycle in 2 years, you will lose all your friends. So nobody does, So listen, what I think will happen for businesses when they do this is that their lifetime value of their clientele is going to go way up. Their churn is going to go way down. Their customer acquisition cost goes way down. That's the dollars and cents of what happens to business. But if you don't do it, you're just going to get commoditized. Like you are going to be, you're going to be Walmart to Amazon, right? Like the giant digital monster is going to eat your food for breakfast, man. Like realtors right now are fighting that against Zillow. Cab drivers are fighting that against Uber. You're going to get commoditized because the giant digital universe is going to completely take out the middle. And unless you are providing some kind of value that they can't, then you're going to lose clients. You're going to lose, employees. You're going to lose whatever. So you need to focus on how do you actually have a genuine relationship so they don't leave you because they love you, not because your product is slightly better than the other product, because someone's going to make a better product. So you got to figure out how to win in the intangible level and in how you connect people to each other, because they don't leave that. That's way harder to leave.
The way you said that, I felt like I was in church. So amen.
All right. That's awesome.
Such passion, just amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
So, Pablo, if you could share a really deeply meaningful message with the world, that's really comes straight from your heart, what would you love to share?
I knew this question was coming, and I was going to tell the story about my brother, and I already did it. But listen, I would say from the bottom of my heart, stop trying to become the king or the queen. Try to become the kingmaker or the queenmaker. Mm-hmm. It is so much more valuable. If you're trying to be king or queen, all you're doing is competing against other people that want to be king or queen. If you focus on being the kingmaker or queenmaker, then everybody that wants to be king or queen wants to be your friend. So everybody that's vying for power will be in your corner. It, to me, is the big unlock that I had in my life in my early 30s, right? Like, stop trying to be the most popular guy in the room and try to be the guy that makes everybody else the popular person in the room, right? Like, stop trying to communicate about what I'm trying to say and start trying to listen to what people are trying to say and enable them and connect dots for them. Be a kingmaker, not a king.
I go for that 100%. And it's such an incredible paradigm shift, like a dramatic paradigm shift. I mean, just to say to people that it's no longer in vogue to be the king or the queen, be the kingmaker and the queenmaker. That's an incredible shift, and it's what our world needs. So, Pablo, thank you. Thank you for taking me to Pablo's church and on community and communication and relationship being business. Amazing to talk with someone that's just so passionate. I mean, it comes like through you, and that's incredible. And so thank you for sharing so passionately your message.
Thank you, Carmen. Like, I just appreciate you, putting me on your stage. I don't undervalue that. I want to tell our friend that's been listening, like, help Carmen's show grow, right? Like, the number one thing that you can do is share this episode with a friend, right? Like, the ratings, the reviews are great, but the way that podcasts grow is if you just take this thing and push share and send it to somebody or post it on your social media and say, hey, this was really intelligent. Listen to Carmen. I think you're putting a lot of great content, a lot of great work that's going to help a lot of people. So let's help Carmen out here.
Yeah. Thank you, Pablo. And he has a show too, so to do the same with his show. And thank you, Pablo, for being on the show, and to every single one of you friends, BwB family, for joining us. Wow, I mean, what stands out for me today is what else could we possibly be missing? Let's look for that within each other, around us, because there's so many things that we're missing because we're just not present. So let's get present with each other. Let's build these deep relationships. It is the way to go. Let's be in vogue, and let's be the king makers and the queen makers and collaborate instead of compete. And we absolutely will together create a new human story. So until next time, lots of love.